Okay, cool. So, welcome to today's Metabolic Monday. Today, we're going to be going on a little bit deeper dive of understanding quality food and primarily around protein, because I think we get a lot of confusion around like what's the difference between local meats, what's the difference between grass-fed, grass-finished, what's the difference between pasture-raised, cage or caged eggs, or um, wild or farmed fish, all these different things. And I've got a PDF that I'll be sharing at the end of this that you can get a hold of that'll summarize everything that we talk about in visual form. But I just want to talk to you about this over the video. And I think combining, both hearing it as well as seeing it in addition will help you really understand this at a deeper level. So whether you're buying food or meat at the grocery store or on Amazon or online or getting it from a local farmer, you're going to understand what these foods, how they differ, and ultimately how it's going to impact your health, your metabolism, and ultimately reaching your goals, short term and long. Now, I want to emphasize here that when you go through the nutrition framework, you want to at least prioritize any type of protein, animal protein. So whether it's just conventional beef that you get from the store, or you're going with locally raised, locally farmed, regenerative beef, which would be what I would consider the pinnacle, the best type of meat that you could get, you want to just make sure that you're prioritizing protein first and foremost. So no matter what your budget is, no matter what your resources are, you want to make sure that you're at least making a good choice. You don't want good to be the enemy of perfection, right? We don't have to be perfect all the time, but you can certainly make better choices. And when you have more knowledge and you apply action to it, you're going to get better results, and it's going to make you wiser. So the information you're going to be getting here, it all can be found online, but this is all about just condensing it and curating it in a way that you can digest and absorb this information more, so that you can make better decisions for yourself, and you'll have resources on where to get all these different types of meats in terms of all the different forms, which we'll get into now. So I first want to go over beef. So the difference between different types of beef, we have grass-fed, we have grain-fed, grass-fed, and then we have grass-finished beef. And there's different types of levels to this. And I'm going to start with good and then go to the most optimal and the best choice, right? So grain-fed is typically what we call conventionally raised cattle. So these cattle are raised in feedlots. They're not really raised in a humanely way. They're fed a lot of corn, soy, and grains that are genetically modified. So it's kind of we call it the industrial complex, or the conventional farming industrial complex. There's many different terms for it. I'm kind of butchering and mixing them all together here, but the industrial complex is really just all about turning out the most meat in the least amount of time to get the most profit. And so you can equate health and anything of quality. The shorter time it takes and the more it's pumped up with artificial things, the less quality it's going to be, right? The more naturally raised it is, the more humanely raised it is, the better it's going to be for the environment, the better it's going to be for us, and the better it's going to be for the animal, which I'll get into. And I'll add this little context here. So you are what you eat, right? What you take in terms of food ultimately translates to what you are in terms of body and health and energy. It affects your sleep. It affects your hormones. It affects the toxins that we ingest are around every single day. And the quality of input, the quality of information, and food is information. It's giving our body a signal to do something. We absorb what the animal eats. We absorb what the animal experiences. So just as you have a stress response, there's a biochemical equivalent. There's a chemical equivalent to every experience that we have. So if you're stressed, you're producing stress hormones. And if you produce a lot of stress hormones and you're in an environment that causes a lot of stress, meaning it's dirty, they're stepping in their crud, they're around, they're not getting sunlight, it's going to cause a lot of chemical stress within the body of the animal, which then translates to in the same chemicals in its meat. It's not going to absorb nutrients as well. It's going to have more chemical stressors in the meat itself, which then translates to us eating that meat, right? And the fat that's contained within it. And this is what we do with our bodies. When we ingest a lot of toxins and experience a lot of stress over time, we gain weight. We gain weight in the form of body fat, and body fat is really the dirty closet of our bodies, right? It's a storage of inflammation, and when it's abused and not provided the right type of energy and information, well, we gain and we break down. We gain weight and we break down. So we want to look at this from the animals that we eat, and this is ultimately to inform you to make better decisions and going, okay, if grain fed is where you're starting off, it's better than eating processed foods such as, simple sugars, canned or boxed goods, or fast food or anything like that, right? So we're going from a bad situation to a good choice. Then we can make better choices along the way. So grain fed is really that like baseline, starting from a very foundational level of choosing your protein. So taking it to the next level, grass fed is where the animals are fed for 0 to 7 months. They're fed grass. So whether they are out in the pasture or they're actually hauled in types of grass that they can eat in the feedlots, they're still raised in a confined area, massively produced. Lots of growth hormones and antibiotics are used in this as well. So grain fed and then grass fed brings it from like a C to a C plus, right? So grass fed is also fattened up at the end with corn, soy, and GMO grains and things of that nature. So that means there's pesticides, chemicals involved with it. So this isn't to deter you from eating that. It's just knowing that, there's good, and then there's much better options. And these are options that you can get within the store or frankly anywhere. But the best form is what's known as grass-fed, grass-finished. Now, I'm going to say the best in terms of if you go to the grocery store, grass-fed, grass-finished is the best option you can go with. This is where the animals are raised as nature intended. They're eating grass, they're around bugs, there's nutritious vegetation. They're in wide open spaces. They're ethically raised, so they're not stressed out. They're living their whole life outside and free to roam, essentially. And there's no hormones or antibiotics used in these animals. And this means that their fat content and their meat content is going to be much more nutritionally dense. So you hear about omega-3s, fatty acids. This comes from fish a lot of times. Well, it's also contained within beef as well. It's contained in every animal. But it's about what the fat is actually made of. That's going to determine if it's pro-inflammatory, which is not what we want, or anti-inflammatory, which was what we want. So grass-fed, grass-finished is one of the best options you can go with in stores. The ultimate option to go with is locally raised, regenerative farmed beef and animals, frankly, all in all. And I'll give you resources on how you can search for local farms in your area to support local farmers and find some regenerative farmed meat near you, no matter what state you're living in. So keep that in mind. There's good, and then there's great options. And so just to kind of summarize all this with beef, grain fed, grass finished, and then regenerative farm or locally farmed cattle or beef is going to be your best option to go with. So you got 4 different tiers to go with. And grass-fed, grass-finished means that it was brought up and raised in an open space, eating grass, little to no antibiotics. I can't guarantee all of them don't use some sort of hormone or antibiotics, because there's a lot of mixed words that they can throw in to say that, it's clean when it's, for instance, if they're eating organic feed, that doesn't mean that they're not eating grain. Organic just means that they have pesticides or chemicals that are organic. So it doesn't mean that they're not using chemicals. So this is all just to kind of inform us that, what they say is not exactly what they mean. Like grass fed, you only have to feed the animal for 7 months, right? And then for the rest of its life, 7 months and beyond, it can just eat regular grain, just as the grain-fed beef would as well. So it's a step above, but it's not the best option. So I would recommend going with locally farmed animals as the best option, because you're not only supporting your local farmer, you know where your food is coming from. You can actually visit the farm. You can actually go and check it out and connect with your food at a deeper level. It changes how you look at your plate. And this is ultimately going to lead to the whole skew of what metabolic mastery is all about, is the holistic approach to things. Because there's actually a whole, and you'll look into the modules on the metabolic mastery course, on the modules, you're going to notice that I talk a lot about light code and circadian rhythm, and the animals, if they're in your zip code, if they're in your local area, they're in the same time code as you. So the sun rises at the same time for them as it does for you, as opposed to if you're getting beef from New Zealand, you're literally that beef is being raised on the other side of the world, which has a whole different type of circadian rhythm, which throws off your gut. So this is ultimately to align your gut health with your hormone health, with your metabolism, with your sleep, with your energy, with everything. So know that there's deeper layers to this that we're not necessarily going to go into today, but I just want you to understand that that's why I consider locally farmed, locally raised beef as the best option, because you can check it out, verify, and see how your beef is actually being raised, who's raising your beef, and get a feel for where your food actually comes from. Because it's pretty weird when you actually think about it, that we go pick up food from the store and we actually have no idea what that process goes through, what this animal went through, how they live, how ethical the farmer is, if they're actually telling you what's real. There's a lot of space in between the farmer and the end user, us. So the more you can connect with the food and the things around you, and the more control you're going to have within your own health. And that's what metabolic mastery is all about, is really just controlling what you can control. And that first starts off with yourself, and then also empowering yourself with knowledge to make the right choices, not only with your food, but other things around as well. So we're going to move on from beef to seafood. So again, this terminology gets really skewed. You can get a lot of seafood from stores. You can get it online as well. And there's a lot of different types of seafood that you can get. So you go to salmon, smoked salmon, which is one of my favorite foods. You can get farmed, which it'll just say salmon or smoked salmon on it. Then you can get wild caught, or you can get wild. And these things are all different. They're all differently raised. So we'll start off with the same type of trend. So what's good, and then what's best. And with farmed, I would try to avoid farmed seafood altogether as much as possible. So this is where the seafood, whether it's salmon or herring or anything, tilapia, whatever it may be, this is seafood raised in confined areas. So they're in a confined vat, and they don't live any other portion of life outside of the wild. And these are considered farm. So they're basically, how to put it, like they're just swimming in their fecal matter. There's a lot of parasites. There's something known as sea lice, and there's a lot of damage to the local ecosystem with farm raising fish. Now, this also means the quality of the environment for the fish, right? So the quality of meat and the fish swimming in an environment that's very dirty, it's going to cause the quality of meat to go down as well, which means the omega-3 content is going to go down, which means there's going to be more pro-inflammatory markers in the meat. And when I say pro-inflammatory versus anti-inflammatory, we want to be anti-inflammatory as much as possible. That means that the food we eat, that it's anti-inflammatory, is going to help reduce inflammation within us, which is going to reduce body fat, which is going to reduce stress on our body, which is going to reduce stress in your perception of stress in life, which increases the amount of energy that you can retain in your body. Now, something I'll add here, if you haven't gotten to the quantum modules within metabolic mastery, I go over how to retain electrons. And ultimately, health is all about maintaining and retaining electrons. And I don't want to go too far off into a side note if you haven't gone through it yet, but ultimately understand that food that contains a lot of electrons, we're getting to an atomic or quantum level, the more electrons you can absorb, think of grounding as a way to absorb electrons from the earth. The same thing goes with our food. If you can gather a lot of electrons from a heavy dose of electrons in the food, meaning that farmed fish is not going to contain a lot of electrons. It's very pro-inflammatory, right? Versus wild seafood, which we'll get into. Wild fish is going to have a lot of electrons because it's anti-inflammatory. So just kind of walk away understanding that, we're absorbing energy here and we're absorbing atoms, and within those atoms contain a lot of electrons. And if we're not absorbing a lot of electrons, it means that we're losing energy. And when we lose energy, we gain weight. When we lose energy, we feel joint pain. When we lose energy, we experience brain fog and disrupted sleep and hormone imbalance and gut issues and all these things we're looking to correct and optimize. It comes down to these root sources, these root causes, what you're putting in your mouth. And the more you can understand what's actually going on when you put things in your stomach, it's going to change how you make your food choices here, which is ultimately what this is all about. Make better choices. You're going to have a better life and more energy to have a better life. So we went over farmed. Now we're going to go over the mid tier, what I would consider like, B class when it comes to, or really C class when it comes to fish and any type of seafood. So that's wild caught. So wild caught refers to fish being produced. It could be produced in a controlled environment, and then the fish is released into a stream, river, or ocean, and then they catch it and then process it. Now, there's a lot of ambiguity that comes within this. So it means that essentially you can raise a fish in a farmed type of environment, right? So dirty, a lot of sea lice and all these parasites. And then you can launch it out into the river or the stream or the ocean and have it netted, right? So it's confined so they don't lose the fish, and then essentially catch it or net it to then process it. How long that has to happen is not necessarily designated. So theoretically, you could raise a farm fish, throw it into the ocean in a net, and then call it wild caught and just pull it right out of the ocean. That's, to me, I don't trust the industrial complex to say that they're going to let it sit and detox and clean itself up. That's just me being a little bit more paranoid, but I've been in this industry for a long time, and what they say they're doing is not necessarily what you think they're doing. There's a lot of marketing, a lot of misconceptions out there. So wild caught is bare bone basics what I would recommend going for seafood. Just understand that it's not necessarily wild the whole time. It's often raised in a conventional format like a farmed fish. Then they let it out. Some are very good about letting it go, letting it be wild, restocking streams, rivers, and whatnot. But just understand that there can be a lot of mixed batches of quality when it comes to this. But the only one that I recommend in terms of like you can walk away with certainty is wild. So there's a difference between wild caught and wild seafood. Wild seafood, this is both fish and shellfish, have had their entire life out in the ocean or out in the river or out in the stream, right? So it's grown from egg to a mature fish or shellfish, whether it be lobster or anything else, and it is caught in the wild. So if you think about like I think of Biggest Catch on Discovery Channel, how they attract these crabs and then net a bunch of them. That's still wild caught. These animals are out in the ocean, out in the open. They're not being fed, they're not being harvested in any way other than just being caught. And it can be caught on a massive level. It doesn't mean that they're not wild though. And certainly they're a lot more healthy living out in the wild, just as our beef is living out in the wild, so should our seafood. And it signifies what you think wild caught would be Wild is the only designation. It doesn't have wild caught on it. It's only wild. That is the way nature intended it to be, and that's going to be the healthiest food for you. Now, you can verify this at restaurants. Is it wild? Is it wild caught? Give me some information here. Take a stance on where you're grabbing your food and finding out information. I just went to a restaurant last night for family dinner, and I was ordering some meat, and it came with a side of potatoes. And I was asking, what is it cooked in? And they couldn't verify it at first until they found out that the potatoes were cooked in canola oil. And I told them, I'm going to pass on that. Give me some asparagus. Can you please cook it in butter? And they're like, yeah, that's fine. And the waitress even mentioned that nobody's ever asked them what their potatoes were cooked in actually. And this is an example of just take control of your environment, take control of your food. So same thing, if you're ordering seafood or you're ordering beef or a steak, you can verify, is it grass-fed? Is it grass-fed, grass-finished? Is it locally raised? Where do you get your meat from? I'd like to know. And can you cook it in butter? Can you cook it in natural fats? Don't cook it in canola oil. Don't cook it in industrial seed oils, right? Safflower, sunflower, or any of those rancid oils should only be cooked in butter, maybe coconut oil, or sometimes avocado, but I would really just stick to butter as the main source of food that's that you cook your food in or get your food ordered from that's cooked in. So back to the seafood, wild is the way to go. Wild caught, you're going to find a lot of wild caught options in the stores. You just need to look at the label. You need to read the back. You need to look at all the wording that they have in there. They will say that it's farmed. They will say that it comes from China, which I would avoid any type of like China sea type of raised fish as well, because there's a lot of farmed operations out there that pass off as wild caught, as I just told you, raising it in a farmed location, dumping it into the ocean, which is still netted, and then they just pick it out of the water and now it's wild caught and they can upcharge it, right? It's still not anywhere near as healthy as what we would think is wild caught should be. So just a little FYI there. Wild is the way to go. If you can find wild salmon, wild lobster, wild sardines, anything like that, you're much better off than wild caught or certainly farmed. All right, moving on to the next. Poultry, chicken, turkey, right? Geese, duck, all these things can be raised in farms. But we look at really what the different classifications of poultry is. So you have, when it comes to eggs, we'll go through this first, cage-free versus free range. So cage-free versus free range eggs tend to be very misleading. They both sound very positive, like, cage-free, free range, the animal's free to roam. But this is still a restricted space for the animal. And they have a very low quality standard for the farmers to maintain these animals. Now, I want to keep them the conventional, the industrial farming complex, the get the best bang for your buck. And we're talking about the farmers and the companies that run these. We're looking at this and seeing that they don't care about the quality of animals, just to remind you, right? So cage free and free range, still a very confined environment for the animal. And what happens with these animals is birds poop a lot, right? Like, this is the biggest thing I want to walk away from, is like, the animals that we eat, they're literally stepping in their own shit. They're literally stepping and swimming in their own shit. This is the conventional way of doing things. So they got to be pumped with antibiotics, pumped with chemicals, pesticides, parasite-free stuff. And it's all chemicals to keep these animals alive enough to plump them up with food that they shouldn't be eating, or that is artificial, or is that GMO, genetically modified. And it's all just this conglomerate that feeds the companies that provide this feed, provide these antibiotics, provide these things that keep the animals alive long enough just to be processed. It's a mirror of how the health industrial complex runs, right? people get sick, they go to a doctor, they get medication, they're not treated with the root cause, they get sick again, they're constantly being pumped with medication over and over and over and over and over again, right? Like diabetes is thought to not be curable, and I'm going to argue that it is reversible if you can fix your metabolism in time so that you don't have to go through extreme measures such as, the extreme measures of diabetes and whatnot. So it is reversible. I've seen it. I've experienced it. I've had clients who have gone from diabetic to nowhere near diabetic. And you got to fix the metabolism. You got to fix your environment. You got to fix what you're around, right? So same thing goes with these animals, right? So cage-free, free range is not going to be a conducive environment for the animal and not good for us, right? So they're in restricted, confined areas. They're not getting sunlight. They're not probably being fed the right things. They're being fed grain when chickens and poultry are predators. They eat bugs. They eat larvae. They eat different things. They don't eat typically plants. They're more predators than anything else. But these animals are being pumped with grains. They're being fed grains. It's the same thing that would happen with a human. If we just ate grains all day, you get fat, sick, and really just all sorts of disease and issues, right? So if we eat meat, what we're supposed to be eating, healthy meat, we're going to energize ourselves and be stronger and more lean as a process to it. So the next stage from cage free and free range, which I would avoid altogether, but if you got no other options, go with the free range. Go with the free range. You're better off going with that than not eating eggs whatsoever. But cage free is going to be the next best option. So this is what I would say in terms of the spectrum of what's good, better, and best. Better is cage free, right? So these animals don't live in cages, but they still can be crammed in a barn with 20 to 40,000 birds in a barn, unable to move and unable to access outdoors. So what happens with these, and I've worked with a regenerative farmer who's told me about these conventional practices, and these animals end up burning their feet from the ammonia from all the poop that is on the ground. So they get burns and they don't move after a while. So you get an animal that doesn't move, and you're eating an animal that doesn't move, that's causing you to have low energy so you don't move. See how this all just circulates? It's all connected. So we want to get away from the 20 to 40,000 cram chickens in a barn that get no sunlight, that are eating crap, that don't move and are sitting in their own crap, and get to what we define as the best option, which is pasture raised. So let me kind of reverse here. So cage free, free range, we want to avoid. Cage free, it's okay. I'm not even going to say better option. It's going to be okay option. Now that I kind of read through that definition a little bit more, I just want to recite that and clarify that. Free range would be a better option. Free range. So this is where the poultry or the animals have at least 2 square feet of outdoor area per bird. So it doesn't mean that the birds don't ever see outdoors. It's just they got a little area. It's not like they're boxed into 2 square feet of a box where they can only move in this area. It means that per bird, there's 2 feet, which means the animals can work, kind of congregate together and move around freely in that area. And that's a better option than the cage free. So free range, you're going to see free range eggs, free range poultry, free range chicken thighs, meat, breast, etc. Free range is going to be a better option than cage free. And if you just get conventional chicken, if you just get regular chicken at the store, if you get regular eggs at the store, this is cage free or free range. So this is where they are crammed in, 40,000 in a barn, very restricted, and a very low bar for the farmers to keep them alive, right? So cage free, free range, cage free, and I'm jolting this around. Cage free, free range. There we go. And you'll have a blueprint of all this on the PDF so that you don't get too confused here. Let's see what else we got here. So the last one, and really the gold standard here, is pasture raised. So cage free, free range, pasture raised. Free range is the best, or pasture raised is the best choice out of the two. And the reason being is because pasture raised is how nature intends, right? So they're raised in a way that is consistent with chickens and how they naturally live. They're able to scratch, peck, move around. They are not staying in the same place at all times, so they're not burning their feet, right, from all the ammonia from the poop. When they're certified humane, when they have a certified humane label, which means they're humanely treated or humanely raised, this indicates that the hens are given 108 square feet of outdoor space per bird. So instead of 2 feet, 108 square feet per bird. It's a big difference, right? As well as access to a barn for shade and cover so they can go in and out. Or they have a shaded mobile coop, which I've seen, which allows them to go from one piece of grass to the next piece of grass to the next piece of grass over time. This is the way they should be raised, right? So they're free to forage for grubs, insects, which is their natural diet. Again, this leads to healthy omega-3s, anti-inflammatory, the meat is anti-inflammatory. Their fat is anti-inflammatory, which means it's anti-inflammatory for you. When an animal is sitting in a cage or is in a barn all its life and can't move, it's going to be very pro-inflammatory. It's going to lead to sickness, inflammation, disease, and poor health, right? So to recap on the poultry, we got caged, we got free range, then we got pasture raised, and pasture raised is the best option. And the best option is going with the locally sourced, locally farmed, where you can see the chickens, where they're raised, how they're raised, and getting to know your farmer, which we'll get into here in a bit. So we got our meat, we got our beef, we got our seafood, we have our poultry. One additional one I want to add is pork. Pork gets a bad rap, and again, they're typically raised in the conventional way, so they're packed to the brim, they're indoors, they're caged, they don't get to move around freely, they are pumped with antibiotics and food that they shouldn't be eating. But if you get a forest dwelling pig, or if you get forest dwelling pigs, right, that's where they really belong. So they're in a somewhat shaded environment, they are rooting, so they dig into the roots of the plants and they eat that. They're raised humanely, free to roam, free to range, outside all day. They're getting into the dirt as they should be, which builds up a strong immune system for them, and then they are processed in a humanely way as well. So all these animals should be processed. And what I mean is butchered, processed, killed, right? But they're not being led through a slaughter line and seeing all these animals getting killed one after another and causing stress, right? They're humanely put down in a way that doesn't cause them stress, which leads to a healthier quality of meat and fat within the animal, right? So this is really the rundown of understanding your food at a deeper level, right? So when we look at this at a much, much deeper level, it is far better to go with not only paying the price, but doing the research and looking at things from a deeper level and understanding if you just get the conventional beef or the conventional eggs or the conventional seafood or the conventional poultry, and this is stuff that doesn't have any label on it other than chicken, beef, salmon, or anything like that, or just eggs, you're going the conventional route. And we know how they're living, we know how they're being treated, we know how they're being raised, and just look at it the same as you would raise your kids. You would want them to be humanely treated, plenty of space to play. How would you want to raise your pets? It's the same type of thing, because how we treat these animals is how we treat ourselves, and we vote with our dollars, right? So the more you understand about this process, the more you understand about how this affects your energy, affects your ability to be authentic to others. We're all in sales in some way, shape, or form, right? So it's about really coming up and being aware of, the quality energy that you put in is going to lead to quality energy and information coming out. And I think that's really important to understand at a deeper level. And there's a lot of confusion around this. Like, okay, what's good seafood? What's good poultry? What's good beef? What's good pork? All these things really matter. And so if we go with regenerative farming or regenerative locally farmed foods, you're going to be one step closer and one step ahead from everybody else when it comes to your quality meat selection, your quality food, and what you put on your plate. And you'll feel it. You'll feel more energized and more empowered by the food that you're taking in, because you know what's going into this food. And that, in essence, I think plays a big part in how we absorb our food as well. I know when I just had some chicken wings from a regenerative farm locally over here in the Chicagoland area, and it's empowering to eat this food knowing the farmer who processed this for me. I've talked to him, I've shaken hands with him, I got him on my cell phone, literally, so I'm able to touch base with the guy who handles my food. It's very empowering. It definitely adds a different level of knowing and different taste to the food as well, but it certainly does taste cleaner. And I think for the long run, it's the next step in our health evolution is going with more locally farmed, locally raised food as much as possible. And when you go through the modules in Metabolic Mastery, you're going to start to connect the dots here. Like all these things that I'm talking about, you might not get everything all at once, but it's a journey. Chris has been on this for years now, and we're always connecting dots with each other. I'm always connecting dots with things that I heard about in the past, that I learned about recently, or I've heard it 10, 20 times. And now I'm finally connecting the dots and going, now I get it. For the longest time, I heard about my mentors telling me, get locally raised meat, get grass-fed, grass-finished. Why does it matter? And I didn't know why it mattered for, quite frankly, years, until I understood that these animals are eating something and they become what they eat, and we are eating them and we become what we eat, right? So it's energy in, energy out. It's an energy exchange all around. So that's all I got for the presentation here. I'll open it up to any questions, comments that you guys got. Sean, I see you raising your hand here, so I'll put on the mic here so I can hear you. And let's make sure we got this. Okay, cool. Let me see if you guys can hear me now.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, we can't hear anything you're saying, Justin. Uh,
Am I coming? There we go. Okay, cool.
there you are.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, quick question as it relates to the butter.
Yeah.
Like, um, is there a certain quality of butter that we should be looking for?
Yeah, I think there was, for some time, Kerrygold used to be the gold standard in like grass-fed, grass-finished butter, but they got popped off, I think, for kind of just saying, yeah, we do it, but they didn't do it. I since then believe they cleared all that up. So I haven't had any issues. But Kerrygold is a good one to go with from the grocery store. There's actually, you can get like Amish rolled butter, which is like, it's no particular brand. It's just like, it comes in a white, kind of like what they pack meat in, like kosher type of butter. That's another good option to go with. And then you can also, I do have some options that I have in the PDF that you can go with, then just order directly from Amazon as well. And there's also like local dairy farms. There's something called rawdairy.com that you can look up local dairy farmers in your area. And that would, of course, be the best option by far. Rawdairy.com. I'll type that in the
No, that's awesome, Justin. Thank you.
yeah, definitely. Felicia, Chris, you guys got any questions, any feedback? Okay, cool. Sean, you got anything else, man?
No, I think that pretty much answered everything for me. Appreciate it.
Okay, cool. Was this helpful, guys? I hope this was useful information, gave you some little bit more knowledge and understanding, and just a little bit more. Okay, good. Thanks for the feedback. Want to make sure your time is very valuable, and I want to make sure that we're putting good use to it. So, good. Awesome. 100%. Very helpful. Yes. Chris, I'll be having PDF that I'll be including in this. It'll be on the Metabolic Mastery app, the school app, and that'll be on there as well. But I'm thinking you're talking about for the presentation as well, having some slides, which I'll keep that in mind next time for sure. But this will be a really good rundown. The PDF, I think you'll be very pleased because I think it'll be more concise than what I talked about for the last half hour, 40 minutes here. And it'll be a good cheat sheet that you can go with to your family and peeps around you to make better informed decisions. So if you guys are all good here, I'm going to be letting you all go. Enjoy the night, and I will see you guys next week for the next Metabolic Monday. Take care.
Thanks.